And I want to give you another example of what I mean when I talk about ideology. What I mean when I say that there are always assumptions behind the way we go out in the world to understand the world and then communicate that understanding to others, which is what journalists do. They go out in the world, they try to understand that world, and then they communicate it to others in a timely fashion. A simple definition of journalism. And anytime you do that, anytime human beings work to understand the world and communicate that understanding, there's ideology at work, as we've said. Another way to think about this is there are always assumptions behind the way we understand and communicate that understanding. I want to give you an example. We're going to hear a little bit more about this program either next week or the week after. But there's something on the University of Texas campus called the Annette Strauss Institute. It's part of the College of Communication, in which the School of Journalism is housed, and it's aimed at encouraging political participation. They have something called the New Politics Forum that, as I said, somebody's going to come and tell us a bit more about. And as I was watching these, I thought this was a good example to use to make the point. So I'm going to play this very short clip, which is a promo for the New Politics Forum, and then I'll come back and say a few words about it. Now, if you look at the literature for the Annette Strauss Institute, it will tell you that they are nonpartisan. If you look up here, it says this New Politics Forum is nonpartisan, taught by professionals, and youth-focused. Okay? So the Annette Strauss Institute is, in a sense, trying to offer a place where young people can come and learn about politics. And it's claiming that it's open, right? It's nonpartisan. It's not trying to push a particular political perspective. That's the impression you get if you read deeply into their literature. I thought this was a good example, though, of how what is presented as nonpartisan, they're presenting themselves, in a sense, as being neutral. They're not pro-Republican, they're not pro-Democrat. They're just trying to get you, young people, involved in politics, yes? Because young people are often cynical about politics. So you might say, well, what's to not like about this? You know, it might be an interesting program, and in fact it might be, and I would encourage folks to look into it. But I would make the argument that this is a highly ideological program. Highly ideological. Now, remember the three definitions I gave you of ideological. By highly ideological, I don't mean that they have an ideology which keeps them from understanding the world. Right? That first use of it that I said in everyday language, people often use ideological as an insult. I don't mean it that way. I also don't just mean it that it's ideological in the sense, the sociological sense I said, that we recognize that all of us have an ideology. All of us have a framework. All of us have a set of assumptions that guide what we do. In that sense, it's ideological, but so am I, and so are you. I mean that this is a highly ideological program in that third critical sense. That it is an attempt to get people that we would call ordinary folks, the masses, us, people who don't have an extraordinary amount of wealth and power. It's an attempt to get us to think like the people who have that wealth and power. And you might say, but Jensen, you're missing the point. They're not partisan. They're not trying to advocate for one particular party, one particular politician, one particular set of policies. They're trying to transcend that. But there's an assumption that you can see quite clearly in the New Politics Forum and the Strauss Institute that I'm going to argue is highly ideological. And it's very simple. They want you to think about politics in terms of elections, political parties, and voting. They want you to think about politics. They want you to get excited about politics, but politics defined as elections, parties, and voting. And since we live in a two-party system, you saw representatives in that clip from which of the parties? The Republican and the Democratic Party, the two major parties. Highly ideological. Why? Because this is one approach to politics, but it's not the only approach to politics. It's an approach to politics that I would argue is is intensely ideological because it is always working to support the existing distribution of wealth and power. That if you define politics simply as elections, parties, and voting, you are constraining politics within such a narrow spectrum that it will always end up validating the existing distribution of wealth and power. That if you think of politics as only mobilizing people to vote in elections for the existing political parties, you are giving over your life to the existing distribution of power. Let me illustrate that with one of my favorite quotes. There we go. Lucy Parsons, well-known labor organizer in the United States, died in 1942, once said, "Never be deceived that the rich will allow you to vote away their wealth." So how do we connect the two? If politics is about elections, parties, and voting, if you channel all of your political energy into that, then the argument from this critical point of view is that you are giving over your political energy to the existing system, the existing distribution of wealth and power. Lucy Parsons and others like her had a different point of view. They said basically that system of elections, parties, and voting is rigged in favor of those with concentrated wealth. And you can participate in that system. There's nothing necessarily wrong with participating in that system, but don't believe that that system is the vehicle by which you can change the existing distribution of wealth. The rich, she said, will never allow you to vote away their wealth. And there's a lot of historical evidence that that's a reasonable claim. That if you try to use that existing political system to dramatically change the distribution of wealth, you will find yourself up against resistance from that system, up to and including violence. And in fact, in the history of the United States, violence was employed when people like Lucy Parsons got a little too close to challenging that existing distribution of wealth. Lucy Parsons was a member of the Industrial Workers of the World. She was actually a Texan by birth, very much involved in late 19th, early 20th century labor organizing, very radical person, and very well known within the more radical elements of the labor movement. Now, she was a very political person. Lucy Parsons essentially dedicated her whole life to politics. But she never ran for office. She never engaged in electoral politics. And she had no use for the existing political parties. She was an organizer on the street. She was trying to mobilize people into different kinds of political formations to challenge the existing system of wealth and power. Now, this is another one of those examples where I'm not suggesting you should believe one thing or another. Again, there's a lot of us in the room, a lot of different opinions. I'm trying to make the point that if politics is reduced to elections, voting, parties, right, that is a highly ideological decision. The claim that you should direct your energies there is a highly ideological claim because politics is more than that. And if your goal is to challenge the existing distribution of wealth, that it might be useful to think about other approaches to politics to do that. So what I'm saying is that what makes the Strauss Institute New Politics Forum ideological is the assumption that your best channel for political energy, to place your political energy, is politics, elections, and voting. And that brackets out a whole other way to look at politics, a way that has been important throughout history. So remember, every time you think, this is how I operate in the world, every time I think I know something, I try to step back and say, what assumptions am I making, right, that underlie this claim I'm making to know something? That's what we're trying to do in this class, is to always step back and challenge our own understandings, challenge our own assumptions. And I think that's an essential skill for journalists.